Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back again to go over the top healer trinkets for Season 2 and where to get them. And we're going to talk about some of the M+ ones first, and then some of the raid-focused ones. In general, Burin of the Candle King, which drops from Dark Flame Cleft, is probably your best healer trinket for Mythic Plus. It applies an absorb to your ally, and at heroic level, it was like 3.5, 4 million on a 1.5-minute cooldown. So it's almost half of somebody's health pool, and it absorbs a crazy amount of damage. And this is going to be really clutch for the M+ season because there's tons of priority healing, there's tons of bleeds, tons of dots, lots of magic effects, sometimes 2 at once that are all going to be going out together, making this incredibly valuable as you're pushing and just kind of progressing into higher keys.
Ayakazan here is one of the best trinkets for overall output. As you can see here, it has a high chance to empower the eye, granting you primary stat up to 20 times, decaying rapidly upon leaving combat. Now this is super valuable in raid encounters where you're in combat for 5, 6, potentially even up to 7 minutes, where you're going to be max stacks on this buff. However, it's still pretty good in Mythic Plus, because it's a lot of main stat, you're going to be able to get a lot of HPS out of it. But it says it decays rapidly upon leaving combat. And whenever it says rapidly, it means rapidly. You lose about 1 stack a second, which means that it's a lot less valuable in Mythic Plus, but if you need some stat stick to be able to heal potential boss, it's still very good.
Holy cow. I can't even see what's going on! Alright. Mr. Pick Me Up is one of the better trinkets.
Go.
One of the better ones in the raid, right?
Start fresh.
Yeah.
From the top.
Alright, Jack is telling me Mr. Pick Me Up is one of the better raid trinkets in the actual raid. Your healing spells and abilities have a chance to summon Mr. Pick Me Up for 6 seconds, firing a healing beam every 2 seconds that jumps between 5 injured allies to restore 72,000 health. It's ironic. Can you believe that?
Not really.
I can't either. Overhealing this effect irradiates allies to deal nature damage nearby enemies over 1.5 seconds, increasing by additional overhealing. It's good for damage. You're going to play it for some damage, right, Jack?
No. This is like 10 takes.
No.
This is good enough to run for healing purposes, but you're not running it as a raw damage trinket. You gotta get out of here.
So you're going to... Yeah, this...
You're done.
There you go.
We were getting
There you
somebody
go.
else.
Use
else.
that whole segment. That's good. Use the whole segment.
I know.
Shut up, Kettles.
Yapping.
Okay, guys, House of Cards is a new healer trinket that ramps and gives you mastery, so it's going to be really good for disc and preservation evoker, maybe for some other healers as well, so long as they benefit of that juicy mastery. It drops from the one-armed bandit, and I suspect we're going to be seeing it in raid quite a lot, right, Jack?
Right.
Excellent.
So much better than Kalmazi.
I think mine was pretty good.
When I walked away, was Jack just over Kalmazi's shoulder?
No. I am copyright the video.
This next ring is kind of weird. It's the Funhouse lens, and it's a 1.5-minute cooldown, which grants you crit or haste. This is, I believe, dropping from rares or mobs in the actual Undermine overworld. I haven't actually seen it drop yet or anything along those lines, but it's a pretty good trinket to get if you're at a ramping spec and you don't have House of Cards yet. This is something that you could try to farm up for, to try to get, because a lot of different people are going to want House of Cards. On the damage side for healer trinkets, the top of the class has got to be Bursting Light Shard. So on a 2-minute cooldown, you actually spawn a little light spawn of your own, which is going to sacrifice its own health to pulse damage on enemies around its radius. The thing is, you can actually continuously be healing this light shard until it pulses, I want to say around 8 or 9 times. And so you have to do a lot of single target healing to maintain it and make sure that it stays alive. But if you do, it does an absurd amount of damage on top of it. So this also drops from Priory, and like I said, it has kind of the same effect of the light spawns that you're going to see in that dungeon itself. This is a great trinket to add, particularly for big trash pulls, and also really powerful for priority target adds on boss encounters. Like Motherlode, for example, the second boss, Azarok, has this priority add which you have to kill, and it takes 150% more damage taken while it's empowered. Really good to have a healer damage trinket for specific moments like that. And there's actually a few of them in the raid that you have access to. Florendo's Pilot Light, which is dropping from the Cauldron of Carnage, is haste with an on use, where you ignite the Pilot Light, gain intellect. After you cast 3 spells, you fire off a beam. This is kind of like one of those in between where it does a little bit of damage, gives you a little bit of stats. I don't expect this one to be super and like insanely powerful or anything like that for healers, but it's something that's kind of like a nice benefit if you wanted to add some damage along the way. This is kind of like a little bit of everything, but the Gear Grinder Spare Key, which gives you primary stat, this drops from Vexy, the first boss. You just launch a Gear Grinder to its final blaze of glory, explodes on impact on the first enemy, and then splits around nearby enemies. This one can be really, really powerful, especially if you can kind of like isolate a target that you want to kill off. Like I mentioned before, that Azarok fight is a really good example of just being able to flex into an on-use damage trinket to make sure that you're killing off an ad as quickly as you possibly can. Could be a pretty good option. And lastly, there is one more, and it is the Bomb Suit. So this drops off Gallywix, and this is like an insane uber giga tank trinket. This could be really interesting for like late in the season. Depending on like when we get our dinars, I'd be curious if we'd be able to get this as like a healer, because obviously it's going to tanks very, very early on. But it's haste, and then you deploy a bomb suit to reduce your damage taken by 75% until like 6-7 million damage has been prevented. This one, also upon depletion, explodes, very similar to like the Farak shield from Amirdrasil. And so you have a minute and a half cooldown for a massive shield that you can put onto your character, keep you safe through any sort of insane damage that's going to be going out. Downside is that you're not going to be able to give it to anybody else the way you could with the Buren trinket. So this could be really interesting to see if we get into certain dungeons, kind of like Theater of Pain, I think, which features a lot of one-shots or like near one-shots, really heavy burst damage. It can be really valuable if you can have access to like a tank trinket for things like that, where there's not really like hard heal checks in that dungeon so much as it's a game to survive. Other dungeons, like in Floodgate, you really need to have output trinkets to make sure you can pump tons of healing for mini bosses and like major boss encounters. So it's going to be a major factor in determining how you sort of spec into certain trinkets as you enter them into higher level Mythic Plus. Now, for an overview for some of the big general trinkets, you can always check Questionably Epic and then kind of select it by different healers. Most of these trinkets that you just saw are dropping from Raid, with the exclusion of Buren, because a lot of the trinkets that are dropping from dungeons are like not bad, as you can see with things like Signet of the Priory, which is a 2-minute cooldown, which grants you your highest secondary. That drops from Priory of the Sacred Flame. Card Blazicon Wax, which is int and grants versatility, is really super solid and probably one of your best trinkets to farm up from M+, and that drops from Dark Flame Cleft. There's a few of these, but none of them are really like your best in slot trinket. So I would highly recommend farming up Priory and Dark Flame Cleft to help you around your journey. Soul Letting Ruby's fine too at around a 2-minute cooldown, but you'd really kind of want to have some cooldown sequence to align with it to make it a lot more valuable. Overall, the trinkets that we have for dungeons are kind of like slim pickings, but there's a few, like I mentioned, in Priory and Dark Flame, which are probably going to be some of your best options. But this tier is insanely focused towards a lot of these raid trinkets, especially in the latter half of the raid. So getting in there early, getting familiar with the fights, and maybe even checking out our raid guide to get you prepared for all of these boss fights might be a great play. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and make sure you check out Questionably Epic, as you can compare a lot of your trinkets, and we'll have some videos coming up very soon about how you can compare and sim a lot of your gear as a healer. Thanks for watching. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch y'all next time.